today we're talking about vignetting. I highly recommend you go read this article published by Red Cameras. It talks about basically the mechanics of vignetting and how it happens naturally within the camera. The basics of it though, you can see from this graphic right here. Light comes in through the lens, it passes through the glass elements, and then gets spread out when it hits the sensor. So basically, the light is most powerful when it hits the sensor straight on, and it's less powerful as you move towards the edges. So this less powerful light creates a darkening in the image, which basically means your corners will start to get a darker feel. So you can see that in this image that they've posted right here, how it's nice and bright in the center and it slowly starts to get dark towards the edges and specifically towards the corners. So most lenses will have some sort of natural vignetting that takes place whenever you capture an image. It has been used quite a lot in photography as an artistic choice to add or strengthen your composition. So in Lightroom, in your basic controls, and under the Develop tab, you have the ability to add in a post-crop vignette. So basically what that means is instead of using the camera's natural vignette, which Lightroom has the automated profile correctors to take that out of the image. Once you're done processing, you've resized your crop, your image looks the way you want it to now. You can then add in a vignette after the fact to use that as a final composition element. A lot of people do it. It's really popular. I do it all the time. It was a very popular technique in the darkroom when people processed film and printed their photos in a wet lab. Now, if you watch my other video that goes over the effects panel and what these different effects do, then you have a basic understanding of how Vignette works. I'm going to take you through and show you how I like to use it for my images. Chances are you've seen someone put a vignette on their photo that looks like that. It's very obvious it's a vignette. Black in the corners, a super heavy ring around the image. It's, to me anyways, it's more distracting than helpful for the image. The point of the vignette and the reason it gets used in photography as a composition element is because when you darken the corners, you're literally forcing the eye to the center of the image. You're giving them more reason to look into the center of the image and less reason to look into the corners. So it strengthens the composition by guiding the eye to where you want it to go. If you go beyond that and the vignette itself becomes a distraction, hence leading the eye away from the composition into the corners, it's no longer helping out the image. So we're going to try and find the right balance. When I start to create a vignette manually, first thing I do is I turn the amount all the way down. And the reason I do that is it helps me gauge the softness and the shape of the vignette very quickly. So the amount, you can only go to -100. It doesn't go darker than that. Your midpoint, basically that means if you were to imagine a ring that creates this vignette, imagine that ring slowly shrinking towards the center of the image. That's what your midpoint is. So as I drop that midpoint to 0, you see it grows closer to the center of the image. Your feather is exactly what it sounds like. It is how long is the distance between full opacity and 0 opacity, and how feathered that vignette is. So if we're to take that all the way up, you'll see how that vignette softens super soft till just this is barely visible, and it goes dark all the way through to the edge of the composition. Your highlights. This control lets you bring back the highlights that might have been burnt out by the vignette. So it'll understand which pixels already have a natural highlight, and instead of letting the vignette affect those, it brings the light back in those pixels. You can see right there what the highlights is affecting. Okay, for me, that is way too much of a vignette. Even though it's a lot softer, it's still very distracting. I have found that for me, I rarely go below -40. That is about the most I will do. Even then, you can see down here, it's super dark, and to my eye, it's still very obvious that this has been heavily vignetted. Sometimes I do that intentionally because I want that look and it becomes a very stylized image. But from what I found, this heavy vignette does not work well when you have contrasting lines in the middle of the vignette. This sort of heavy vignette works better on an image that has a clean color palette all the way around the image. And I'll show you what I'm talking about right here. So you can see our lighting and our coloring is pretty much the same all the way around the edge of this image. So using that super dark vignette, let me just add this in really quick. It's a lot more effective here because we don't have any super contrasting lines like this. Here it's very obvious we have a vignette because we've got these lines kind of breaking that vignette, whereas here it's a lot more subtle. Everything is getting darkened evenly towards the center. So you can get away with a much darker vignette in a composition where you have even lighting all the way around. On a composition like this, where we've got some split coloring and some split lighting, I'm not ever going to go that dark of the vignette. On a Mac and on a Windows, if you hold the Option or Alt key, it comes up with this button here, and you can reset the vignetting, which I'm going to do on both of these. So these are the presets I've created for vignettes I use most often. Now, if you scroll down in the download links below this YouTube video in the description, I have a download link where you can download this pack of vignettes and import them into Lightroom for your use. So these 5 just vary in intensity of vignettes. The super heavy one is the darkest I go. Personally, I don't go below -30. I almost always keep the highlights up because I don't want any highlights getting burned out by the vignette. But this is about the darkest I'll go, and I'm not going to use that on this composition, but I think it'll work just fine with this one. Yep, right there. I'm happy with it. Nothing is burnt to black. I've got even lighting all the way through to the center of the canvas. The vignette totally works with this. It might still be a little bit dark, at which point we can go to the heavy vignette. Okay, yeah, I like that a lot better. Okay, so for this one, I'm just going to click through each of my presets that I've created for the vignette. This first one is my super mild one. It just adds a touch of a vignette, just enough to help the composition, but almost unnoticeable. Then my next one is the mild vignette, the medium, then we've got the heavy vignette, and lastly the super heavy vignette. So I'm not in love with the heavy or the super heavy. To me, those are still too dark. The medium, we could probably get away with that, but I think for this particular composition and lighting, we're going to go with the mild vignette. I think that's the one that will serve this composition the best. Just dark enough to lead you to the center where this becomes the brightest spot on the canvas and it's very obvious what I'm accentuating in the image. I want you to look here. I want you to follow the composition into the center of the frame. The super mild would also work just fine, but I like the slight darker tones that we get in the rock right here and right here with the mild. That just brings me that much further into the composition, and I think that will work just fine. So that's it. Feel free to download my pack of vignettes. The download link will be listed in the description below this YouTube video. Share it with anyone that you think could benefit from this. And as always, have fun. Go play with it. Maybe you start with a preset and you end up tweaking it just a little bit to meet your composition's needs a little bit more. Maybe you start with a super heavy vignette, but you want the midpoint to go out a little bit further, opening that brightness in the canvas. These vignettes are really just a starting place to help you get close to where you want to be, and then you can mess with these controls to fine-tune it to exactly what you need it to be. Well, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.